Hi everyone, welcome to The Fear Files. Today, I've got a story that'll make you think twice before stopping at a yard sale. What started as an innocent purchase, a simple toolbox, turned into a nightmare I'll never forget. It's a chilling tale of curiosity, paranoia, and the terrifying lengths some people will go to for what they want. Imagine finding something that reminds you of your childhood, only to discover it holds a dark and dangerous secret. This is a story about how a nostalgic treasure became a haunting memory. So, turn off the lights, settle in, and let me take you on a journey that'll leave you questioning the ordinary. This is the Toolbox Horror Story. Let's dive in. I'm a 29-year-old insurance agent, and after a week of dealing with policies, claims, and endless phone calls, I unwind by exploring yard sales and discovering hidden treasures. Last month, while driving through a neighborhood, I spotted a yard sale sign and decided to stop. It was a modest setup with random items scattered on a driveway: books, kitchen gadgets, and tools. Among the tools, a rusty red metal toolbox immediately caught my eye. It reminded me of the one my grandfather kept in his garage when I was a kid. Just looking at it brought back the scent of motor oil and sawdust. Curious, I opened the box and found a few simple tools: a couple of wrenches, screwdrivers, and a hammer with a worn wooden handle. Nothing extraordinary, but it held a charm that felt like a connection to the past. For just $10, I bought the toolbox from an older gentleman running the sale. It wasn't just a purchase. It was a nostalgic piece that brought back cherished memories. At a garage sale, I picked up an old toolbox and asked the man in charge, a weathered gentleman in his 50s, "How much for this?" $10, he replied casually. "Deal," I said, handing him the money. We shared a brief chat about how tools aren't made like they used to before I took the toolbox to my car, feeling pleased with the bargain. A week later, the toolbox sat untouched in my garage, waiting to be cleaned and organized. That evening, as I finished dinner, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Curious, I dried my hands on a towel and went to answer it, wondering who could be at the door. On my porch stood a man I didn't recognize, probably in his late 40s. He had a wiry build, short brown hair, and a face marked by hardship. While he wasn't outright threatening, his presence felt heavy and unsettling. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping the door partially closed. "You bought a toolbox at a yard sale last week, right?" he said, his voice low and gravelly. I blinked, caught off guard. Yeah. Why?" "It's mine," he said, leaning in slightly. "It got sold by mistake. I need it back." His words didn't sit well with me. The man at the sale hadn't mentioned anything about it belonging to someone else, and I'd paid for it fair and square. Still, I decided to stay calm and polite as I tried to figure out what was going on. "I'm sorry, but I bought it from the owner." "Are you sure it's the same one?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. "It's the same one," he said firmly. "Look, I don't want trouble. I just need my toolbox back." I hesitated, sensing there was more to his story. "I'm sorry," I repeated, this time more resolutely. "I bought it legally. If there's an issue, you should take it up with the guy who sold it." He stared at me for a moment, his expression unreadable, then gave a sharp nod. "All right," he said, turning to leave. "But I'll be back." True to his word, he returned 2 days later. I was watching TV when the doorbell rang. Peeking through the peephole, I saw him standing there, visibly more agitated. "Hey!" he shouted, knocking harder. "I know you're in there. Just give me the toolbox and I'll leave you alone." His tone sent a chill through me, and I didn't answer, Something about him felt off, like he wasn't just after the toolbox. He paced back and forth on my porch, like a restless predator before finally leaving, but the unease lingered long after he was gone. The visits didn't stop, they only got worse. He started showing up at random times, early morning or late at night, pounding on the door and yelling about the toolbox. One time, I heard the doorknob rattle, and panic hit me as I realized I hadn't locked it. I quickly bolted the door and called a friend. "Dude, this guy's unhinged," my friend said. "You need to call the cops." I hesitated. He hadn't technically broken any laws, and I didn't want to escalate things. But a week later, when he returned and tried to force his way in, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. It was around 9 p.m. I was in the kitchen cleaning up when the pounding started again. This time, it wasn't just knocking. It sounded like someone was trying to shove the door open. "Open the door!" he shouted. "I know you're in there!" My heart raced as I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. With shaky hands, I picked up a kitchen knife for protection. "I'm calling the police!" I yelled through the door. "You need to leave." For a moment, there was silence. Then I heard him mutter something before retreating. I stayed on the line with the 911 operator until the police arrived. When the officer got there, I explained everything. Still shaken, but relieved help had finally come. "Do you know this guy?" the officer asked. "No," I replied. "But he's been showing up all week, saying the toolbox I bought belongs to him." The officer nodded thoughtfully. "We'll file a report and keep an eye out. If he comes back, don't hesitate to call us." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the toolbox. Why was it so important to him? Was it sentimental? Or was there something hidden inside? Curiosity got the better of me, so I went to the garage and opened it. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Just the same old wrenches and screwdrivers I'd seen when I bought it. But then I noticed a false panel at the bottom. With a screwdriver, I pried it open, and what I found left me breathless. Hidden beneath the panel were several small plastic bags filled with white powder. My stomach churned as the realization sank in. Drugs. The man hadn't been after the toolbox itself. He'd been trying to recover his stash. The next morning, I went straight to the police station, toolbox in hand, and explained everything. The officer I spoke to took my statement, his expression grim but unsurprised. "You did the right thing," he assured me. "We'll investigate, but I recommend being extra cautious. If this guy knows you found his stash, he might not give up so easily." After leaving the station, I tried to go about my day. Work, groceries, the usual routine. But my thoughts kept circling back to the past week. It was unsettling to think that an ordinary yard sale purchase had drawn me into such a dangerous situation. That night, as I returned home, the officer's warning lingered in my mind. I knew I'd done the right thing, but a sense of unease stayed with me. If the man wasn't ready to let this go, I would have to stay alert for whatever came next. They promised to investigate, but the officer's parting words stayed with me. Be cautious. As I pulled into my driveway, something felt off. The porch light, which I always kept on, was out, leaving the front of my house cloaked in eerie darkness. Grabbing my phone from the passenger seat, I stepped out and scanned the area. Then I saw it. The front door was wide open, the lock shattered and dangling from the frame. A surge of adrenaline froze me in place as I stared at the broken doorway. Part of me wanted to call the police immediately, but the need to know what was happening in my own home overwhelmed me. Dialing 911, I kept the operator on the line as I cautiously stepped inside. The living room was a disaster zone. Cushions tossed, shelves emptied, and papers scattered everywhere. My heart raced as I moved further in. The kitchen was no better. Cabinet doors hung open, dishes lay shattered on the floor, and the fridge's contents had been dumped haphazardly onto the counters. As I ventured down the hallway toward the bedrooms, I froze at the sound of hurried footsteps. My pulse quickened as I pressed myself against the wall, listening intently. Seconds later, the back door slammed. Peering cautiously, I caught a fleeting glimpse of two men sprinting into the backyard and vanishing into the darkness beyond the fence. I wanted to yell or give chase, but fear held me in place. Instead, I stood still, ensuring they were truly gone before resuming my survey of the damage. The wreckage told a story of desperation, and I knew this wasn't random. Whoever they were, they had come for something specific. My mind raced with questions, but one thing was clear. I wasn't safe here anymore. My bedroom was a complete disaster. Closets flung open, the mattress overturned, and every drawer emptied onto the floor. It didn't take a detective to figure out what they'd been after. The toolbox. The police had it now, secured in an evidence locker, but the intruders clearly didn't know that. They'd been watching me, waiting for the right moment to break in and try to retrieve it themselves. The realization sent a shiver down my spine. These weren't just petty thieves. They were desperate, willing to risk everything to recover their stash. And now, they knew it was gone. The police arrived shortly after. I explained the situation, recounting what I'd seen of the two men. Unfortunately, in the dark, I hadn't gotten a clear look at their faces. The officers took a report, searched the house, and assured me they'd increase patrols in the neighborhood. "Do you think they'll come back?" I asked, my voice trembling, despite my efforts to stay composed. "It's possible," one officer admitted. "But now that they know the toolbox isn't here, they might move on. Either way, we'll keep an eye out. In the meantime, replace your locks and consider installing cameras." Over the next few days, I had the locks changed, set up a security system, and stayed with a friend while trying to process everything. The sense of violation was overwhelming. My home, once my safe haven, had been invaded, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone might still be watching. Even now, I catch myself glancing over my shoulder whenever I come home, scanning for unfamiliar cars or shadowy figures nearby. The police haven't provided any updates on their investigation, and I have no idea if they ever tracked down the man from the yard sale or his accomplices. The uncertainty gnaws at me, leaving me on edge, unsure if this nightmare is truly over or if it's only just begun. Thankfully, the man never returned. Whether the police caught him or he decided it wasn't worth the risk, I'll never know. Still, I was left in a constant state of paranoia, always looking over my shoulder. Looking back, I realize how naive I was to think a simple yard sale could be harmless. What began as a nostalgic purchase turned into one of the most unsettling experiences of my life.
For more videos, please subscribe.